Hi, welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. I'm your host, Charlie Flannery, and my guest today is attorney Burke Fountain. Burke, thanks for coming back.
Oh, you're welcome. We didn't confuse them enough last time.
Burke and I had started talking about what a mortgage is, and now that we've established that, we want to find out what happens when things go wrong.
I believe you're talking about a default of the note and a foreclosure of the mortgage.
Yes. Yes. Talk to me about foreclosure. What happens? I'm just a guy. I don't know.
Usually, it's because people don't pay on time, but it can be other things. That mortgage, which nobody ever reads, which is normally 16 pages long, primarily talks about payment, but there are some other things. To briefly touch on them, you have to keep the building insured. If you don't keep it insured, the bank gets upset because obviously if it burns to the ground, their security's not there anymore. You have to pay your real estate taxes because if you don't pay your real estate taxes, the town or city takes the property away and it has priority. It is in first place over the mortgage without the town or city having to record anything at the registry of deeds. So pay your taxes, pay your insurance, and a bunch of little things. Don't store hazardous waste. You're supposed to maintain the property, and the bank actually has the right to come out and inspect it once in a while, which they never do.
They've been less enthusiastic about enforcing some of these conditions lately with the market being what it is.
Well, also, back in the old days when you had local banks, people actually would drive around and make sure the house was still there.
Yes.
But now that it's owned by some pension fund out in Utah, there's nobody checking on anything.
Yeah.
But anyway, those are all things that can happen. But the big thing is not making the payments. That will be noticed. What happened?
How quickly did they notice it? Because I know from a lot of anecdotal evidence that in years past, when there wasn't the crisis of all these properties that they had to deal with, if you missed one payment, they might call you. If you missed your second payment, they would want you to make at least one payment. And sometimes they'd go along with people for a period of time as long as they were only 1 month behind. Mm-hmm. Once, if it got to the third month, they would accelerate or say, that's it, you know, we're going to foreclose. Today, that's probably not the case. What would happen in today's world? There's
no hard and fast rule on that. If you are 1 day late paying on your mortgage, the bank has the right to start foreclosure. And you are correct, nobody ever starts it after a day. At the 15-day mark, they charge you a late fee. Generally speaking, and again, no hard and fast rules, it's up to the bank, but typically you have to probably be 3 months behind before they're going to seriously start foreclosure.
Okay.
And they want to work with you. The banks do not want to foreclose property. They have more than enough property that they already own. So they will work with you and try to do something. But what typically happens is people don't work with the bank. They don't take the telephone calls. They don't return the telephone calls. They don't stay in touch with the bank. And the bank has no option but to foreclose because they can't communicate with the people.
And that's a tragedy in and of itself, because there are a lot of nonprofit organizations out there that will work with these people for like little or no cost to help them get some type of a modification or to at least establish contact with the lender.
Well, as part of the government bailout, the government set something up with the banks, a program that a lot of people say isn't working very well, but there is a program out there, and as you say, there are a lot of nonprofits, and the banks themselves are willing to do something. They don't want to own real estate. So, but usually the people don't stay in touch, and you know, if both of the people don't have jobs anymore, have no money coming in, I have to agree with them. What's there to talk about?
And if they really aren't earning the $150,000 they told the bank they were earning when they got the loan to begin with.
Well, if for whatever reason they
Yeah.
can't come up with $2,000, $2,500 a month to pay the mortgage, there's going to be a foreclosure. So how does it work?
Yeah.
Used to be that the banks had to send people a 30-day notice. Then the Massachusetts state legislature changed it to a 90-day notice. Now it's a 150-day notice. And there's some technicalities. You only get that notice once every 5 years or something. And in a couple of years after they think the crisis will be over, it's going back to the 90 days. So it's a complicated statute. Basically, at this time, 150-day notice, that you have to give the people a chance, 5 months, to try to catch up before you can proceed with the foreclosure process.
Oh, I see. This is not a 5 months, they do some filing and it takes 5 months, and if you can rectify it in that time, they have to somewhat negotiate with you or attempt
to try to work it out. And
okay.
Again, it's a complicated statute. We
Sure.
could be here 3 shows just on the statute. But yes, and the bank can shorten that time if they can prove that they have done certain things to try to work it out with the people and have tried to reach an agreement and have had meetings and sent the people to counseling and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But basically, 5 months.
All right.
Then the bank...
Things go really downhill after that.
Well, yeah. Then in Massachusetts, not in most states, but in Massachusetts, you go to court to decide whether or not the people are in the military. And it was for many, many years, and it's a federal law that went into effect in 1940. It was Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act. There was a drastic overhaul about 5 years ago, and now it's the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and I can never remember to say it right. And,
I still call it the Soldiers and Sailors.
And most of the people in the courts still don't get it right either.
Yeah.
But you actually go through a court procedure, which you don't in most states. Most states, if the landlord files the bank files an affidavit that the person's not in the military, and they know it because the person works locally and so on and so forth, is good enough.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
That Soldiers and Sailors, is that a federal statute?
Federal.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
But it's not soldiers and sailors, it's service members. So, you file either in the Superior Court or the Land Court, and you allege that the person is not in the military service, and the court requires that it be published in the newspaper of the court's choice once, and you send certified letters to the people, and the people almost never come to the court and say, I'm in the military. That's extremely rare. Most people getting foreclosed aren't.
There have been some exposés in the news lately, and apparently some lenders haven't been bothering to deal with that little detail,
Well, some of the big banks, and yeah, I'm reading it in the newspaper like you, I don't know the full background, but some of the big banks, I forget which one, was it Chase that admitted their...
Oh, they're all equally guilty.
I don't, yeah. One of them, though, recently set up a program to buy new houses for the people who got foreclosed on who shouldn't have been, and set up, a fund to do various things. But we're getting aside.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But no, if people are in the military serving overseas, the whole point of the law is, well, a couple points. And although we're only talking foreclosure, it covers all debts, and it reduces the interest rate people have to pay, and they don't have to pay while in the military, because if you're in the military overseas, you're making very little money. You might have had a job making $10,000 a month over here, and now you're over there and you're making whatever you make in the service, which isn't much. So
this would primarily apply to people like in the Reserve or the National Guard or something like that. They get called up.
Yeah, and it's complicated. There's different parts for if you were in the military at the time, or if you were called up after. And again, it's way too complicated to go into all the fine points. But
we have a JAG expert showing up in 20 minutes, but the show will be over.
Yeah. You'll need one. They have to give notice if the person is in the military. The military will appoint some attorney to represent them to make sure that the bank is obeying the federal laws concerning lowering the interest rate, a certain amount of forgiveness, so on and so forth. And yes, recently some of the banks have forgotten to check as carefully as they should, and they have foreclosed and sold off property. And when a person gets off the plane from Afghanistan, they find out the house isn't theirs anymore. So that's been a mess. But we have a procedure that hopefully makes that not happen in this state. And I haven't heard of it happening in this state. It's been other states where it's happened. But you go through this procedure where you give the people notice, you publish in the newspaper, and especially with publishing in the newspaper, and it has amazed me over the years, people really do read legal notices. I've put legal notices in looking for a missing person or a missing company or something, and you get a call from somebody. I was a secretary there 20 years ago, and that was owned by Mr. Smith. And, well, he died, but he has a son. It is amazing.
The smartest people that I know throw away the other sections of the paper and start reading the legals and classifieds before they go to the news or sports.
Yeah. But I really think that, you know, it's a good system in that you do have that notice in the newspaper. And, you know, there would be some neighbor or relative or somebody who would notice it and pick up the phone to the court or whatever and say, hey, you know, this person is in the military.
Generally,
anyway,
the system works.
It actually works pretty well. So you go through this process, which takes, if you're lucky, 4 or 5 months. Well, if the bank's lucky, 4 or 5 months. And if there's no answer filed, nobody comes into court and says, hey, this person's in the military, the court issues a judgment that the person is not in the military.
It takes that long now?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so now we're talking that 5-month period. Was that just for Massachusetts, or was that federal too?
Massachusetts.
All right, Massachusetts 5. Now we're another 4 months down the line, and we haven't even gotten ready to take step 2 of the hurdle, right?
Correct.
And meanwhile, I'm still living in the house.
Yep. Yep.
This is, you know, so far it doesn't sound too bad. Listen, we're coming up against a hard break, and I'm loving where this is going. I really want you to stay tuned for the second half of today's episode. We'll be right back with Let's Talk Real Estate.
Some things require experts at every stage.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Others are more just a matter of taste and preference.
Just the way I like them.
Buying a home falls somewhere in between. That's why you should visit HomeLoanLearningCenter.com for expert guidance. A website where you can learn just how you should go about buying a home. You'll get facts, tools, and impartial advice. From seeing a lender to settlement and beyond, there's a step-by-step explanation of the process. All at HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
Houston, we have a solution.
Think of it as mission control for buying a home. That's HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
This is a message from HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Can you afford your home loan? Could your mortgage payment increase in a few months to something you can't afford? Hi, I'm Ruby D. If you're not sure you can continue to make your mortgage payments, call a government-approved housing counselor in your community for free and confidential help. Keep your home. Know your loan. Call today.
Call 877-HUD-1515. That's 877-HUD-1515 or go to HUD.gov.
Hi, thanks for hanging in there. And welcome back to more of Let's Talk Real Estate. Burke Fountain, attorney Burke Fountain, and I were talking about the foreclosure process, and we had just covered basically the first 9 months of the downward spiral. So now where do we stand, sir?
Once you get the okay from the court under the Servicemen Civil Relief Act, you've proven to their satisfaction the person isn't in the military serving overseas. You then, and of course that was federal law, now you come to the state law part, which is no more court involved in Massachusetts. About half the courts in half the states require you to get a judge to say it's okay to foreclose. Half the states you don't have to. Technically, Massachusetts, you don't have to, but you've already gone through the court on the federal law. So on the state law, you don't go to court, you just go ahead and do what the statute tells you to do, and you have your sale. So what do? You have to publish in the newspaper 3 times. And by the way, the servicemen's ads are the little ones in the paper. The one you publish 3 times, that's the big long one with the full description of the property and everything. And you have to give notices. You have to go back to the Registry of Deeds and check who owned the property 30 days before. So you're checking it like 28 days before or something. Who owned the property 30 days before, and anybody who had a lien. So if the people were sued by a credit card company, or the people had a second mortgage or whatever, everybody you find that has any interest in the property recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
An attachment, you mean?
An attachment.
Yeah.
Attachment is somebody suing, like a credit card company. Anybody who has a lien against the property gets the notice saying, hey, there's going to be a sale at such and such a time and place, and you are going to get wiped out because this bank is in front of you. So, you know, if you want to protect your interests, maybe you want to come and bid on it.
Yeah.
So you publish it 3 times.
I bet that happens a lot.
Once upon a time it did, but it doesn't anymore. Published in the newspaper 3 times, once a week, 3 weeks, first publication, at least 21 days ahead. So you figure out the date you want, you know, you backtrack on the 21 days and you make in the 28 days to check things at the registry, and you go out, you hire an auctioneer, you do the publishing, and at the time and place being the property, and at the time and on the date called for, you have an auctioneer there, and they have a red flag, and you have your auction. And people who are interested in buying the property, it will say in that notice in the paper that you have to show up. It's usually $5,000 bank check, sometimes 10. On a commercial property, it can be 25,000, even 50,000.
Sure.
Anybody who wants to bid has to check in with the auctioneer and prove they've got the money. You get to hold on to your check, but you show that you've got it, and you can go through with it. And the auctioneer reads off the notice and asks if there's any questions, and then people bid, and usually the people who have shown their check and are real bidders, they stand up close to the auctioneer, and people who are just bystanders and the curious stand back a little bit, and the auctioneer auctions the property off.
What if the person who was being foreclosed upon was able to come up with an uncle with some cash? Would that person be entitled to show up and bid at their own foreclosure auction?
The uncle can show up and bid at the foreclosure auction.
Uncle Tony again.
Yeah. Can the people bid? I mean, technically they can, but there's reasons why it doesn't make any sense. That if they owe $200,000 to the bank, and it gets auctioned off for $100,000, they might have issues with the bank or with the IRS if the bank writes off the 100,000. We'll get to that.
That's called a deficiency judgment. Generally, they wouldn't pursue that in a typical straight foreclosure.
Yep. But if the people were to buy the property back or get title to it later, it puts that mortgage back into effect against the property. So you would never, you want Uncle Tony to handle it.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, anybody, anybody who has the money has the right to come and bid. And the courts certainly want as many people to show up as possible and to raise the price as much so the people don't lose, the bank doesn't lose. So highest bidder gets the property. Now, for some reasons that we talked about last week, everything is so complicated, 9 times out of 10 the bank takes the property back. The bank, if the mortgage is $200,000 and now the property is beat up and because the market is down, it's only worth $100,000, bank still bids $200,000. Go ahead, ask why.
Well, I know why. They can claim a loss later.
Yeah, not exactly.
But all this time, potentially, I could still be living in the dwelling.
Still living.
So you're out there bidding.
Sure.
I'm the lunatic who never paid, and I'm still living there, right?
Sure, and you're up to about a year now.
Yeah, okay.
The bank takes it back because in order for them to file a claim against the mortgage insurance company, I guess I have to explain what mortgage insurance is, or under one of these government programs, part of the bailout or whatever, the bank has to take the property back, try to sell it at that price for a while, and then can sell it, and then they get reimbursed for the loss.
Wow.
Mortgage insurance. And this really goes back, and we didn't touch on it, but this goes back to the closing. If you don't put 20% down, generally speaking, say you only put 5% down, you have to pay mortgage insurance. And people really need to understand that it's not like life insurance or anything. Mortgage insurance only pays the bank, and it pays the bank if you don't pay the mortgage and you default and they foreclose and they lose money.
Do the PMI companies, the private mortgage insurance companies, do they only indemnify the lenders for that 15%? Like say a buyer came in with 5% down and obviously it's required because there's less than 20. Are they only really insuring that 15% or does their liability extend beyond that?
No, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer.
Because I always presumed, I owned a mortgage company for several years, and I believe that is exactly what happens. And if you've ever seen some of the premiums they charge for these PMIs, when really a guy buys a house for $300,000, they're really only insuring $45,000, and they're collecting $1,500, $2,000 a year, and in good times, less than 0.5% of them go bad.
And in the bad times,
in the bad times, it's not a good business.
Yeah.
But in the good times, it's a good business.
You're right.
And
I didn't know that. I never, that's not my part of it. I don't get to see what goes on with the government and the mortgage company and the bank and the insurance company who writes checks to whom for what.
Yeah.
But so anyway, you have the sale, and let's say that you did go with your $5,000 down and you win. The bank doesn't take it back. You get whatever is there. So if you've got some nasty people, very unhappy people living in the house, it's your problem to get them out. It is, if it turns out that the house is falling apart, maybe those unhappy people have ripped out all the plumbing and sold it along the way, and have knocked all the walls down inside, or whatever you get, and generally you have not been in the house to look because those unhappy people
I'm still out on the sidewalk.
Yeah, you're
showing my $5,000 check.
Well, you've now handed over your $5,000 check and signed on the dotted line that you're going to pay whatever it was that you bid within 30 days. And dealing with those people in the house, dealing with whatever condition that house is in, is now your problem.
This is why so very few properties today seem to go at the foreclosure sale. Most of them, the banks do take them back for the reasons of being reimbursed for the loss. And you know, there's really, like you say, there's very little incentive for them. And there's not enough of an incentive price-wise for that guy or gal on the sidewalk showing the $5,000 check. There's too much risk.
Well,
you know?
There are a lot of people, and of course we're in a downturn as far as the building industry goes. So there actually are a lot of builders who would be willing to buy the house and rehab it, and they do go to these. And the bank takes them back for, you know, twice what they're worth.
Well, this is what I mean. If I'm standing on the sidewalk, even though I may be knowledgeable about construction, et cetera, you know, I'm thinking, I still got to have Charlie. He's still living in the house. I got to get him out. God knows what he's going to do to the place while I evict him, right? I can't pay $200,000. I gotta buy it for $100.
Oh, you do.
And the bank will not sell it to me for $100 at that point because they're looking for Uncle Sam or somebody else to reimburse them that $100. Them and the private mortgage companies, right? So that's a bad thing for the, you know, disposing of the inventory.
But the bank will take it back for $200,000 when it was worth $100,000. They'll sit on it for 6 months. They'll pay an attorney to evict the people. They'll pay to winterize it, board it up, everything they need to do, and then they'll sell it 6 months or a year later for $50,000.
But then they get reimbursed for all that.
Again, I don't know how all of that works.
I'm telling you, it's today. My head is spinning. I've been doing this for 27 years. I heard some stuff today. My head is spinning. We may have to grab Burke back for a third time, you know, if I can find it in the budget, because it was just terrific. I liked where we went today, and there's so much stuff still untapped, you know.
Oh, you can talk about this for hours and hours.
Which is not the same as on tap.
Yeah.
By the way, I want you to have a great time down at Mardi Gras.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
I'll do my best.
All right. And I'd like to thank you all for tuning in today. If you'd like a copy of today's episode, please send an email to letstalkrealestate@verizon.net. Please include your name, your address, and your phone number so that we can verify, and we'll get a copy right out to you. That's for the first 100 respondents only. Also, if you can use that same email address, letstalkrealestate@verizon.net, if you have any questions that you'd like to have me forward to Attorney Burke Fountain. And Burke, thanks again one more time.
Okay, good to be here.
I love you. Stay safe.